Tonight, the RCMP is bringing in an official women's police uniform featuring a Muslim hijab. It's January 12th, and you're watching The Ezra Levant Show. Why should others go to jail when you're the biggest carbon consumer I know?
There's 8,500 customers here, and you won't give them an answer.
You come here once a year with a sign, and you feel morally superior.
The only thing I have to say to the government for why I publish it is because it's my bloody right to do so.
According to leaked information obtained by The Rebel, the RCMP is set to unveil a new uniform with a hijab, the Sharia-compliant Muslim head covering for women. An RCMP planning document shown to The Rebel states that the new RCMP hijab is set to be revealed later this month. This news was leaked to us by people within the RCMP who said they were concerned about the inherent sexism of using a symbol of the oppression of Muslim women as an official symbol of Canada's secular police force. There are other obvious issues besides sexism, like the religious and political meaning of the hijab. It's a symbol of political Islam, a flag to be flown to the world to show that Islam inhabits once secular offices of the state. In other words, it's not just sexist, it's the end of the separation of mosque and state. I contacted the RCMP and asked them various questions about their new hijab, including requesting an image of it to see what it looked like. They refused to give us a sneak preview of it before their big fashion show reveal, but other police forces, including in Toronto, Edmonton, and London, England, give us a sense of what other police hijabs look like and are likely templates for the new RCMP one. I asked the RCMP today other questions too, practical questions like, are there any Muslim officers who actually want to wear a hijab right now? Or is this being pushed by the political brass at the top? I suspect it's a politically correct thing by liberal white men, but they won't tell me. I asked the RCMP what message it sends after their decades of wrestling with issues of sexism and sexual harassment the RCMP has finally put behind them, only to now endorse official sexism in a uniform that suggests women must be covered in public and that any woman who isn't covered in public is haram. That is the Arabic word for dirty. That's what a hijab means. Unlike non-hijab women, they're halal or clean. A hijab is about social ranking. Women are lower than men, but women without hijabs are lower than those with them. This is now a part of the RCMP's doctrine. But what about issues of political Islam in the rest of Canada? Muslims represent about 3% of Canadians, but they're responsible for a vast proportion of terrorism offenses, honor killings, and even ordinary violence, which may be what we witnessed in Calgary over the weekend when Somali men shot into a crowded bar, injuring a man. If there is a Muslim character to a crime, like the Muslim honor killings of the 4 Shafia women in Kingston, or the Muslim honor killing of Aqsa Parvez in Mississauga, or a Muslim-only Somali gang, is it appropriate to send an RCMP officer wearing a symbol of political Islam, militant Islam, public Islam, to investigate? The Quran does not prescribe a hijab, let alone the full face obscuring niqab. That's a political statement, a fashion popularized by the Ayatollahs of Iran and by the Wahhabis of Saudi Arabia. Here's a famous picture of thousands of Muslim women in Iran in the late 70s protesting against the new law brought in by the Ayatollah requiring women to wear veils. It's a political symbol of oppression. It's not normal. It's not even normal in Islam. Only stupid white Western liberals think it's being tolerant to accept it in a secular institution like a police force to begin with. But what about policing where the suspects or even the crimes have an Islamic character? Let me tell you what I mean very specifically. I mentioned the Shafia honor murders, 4 women murdered, 3 girls and 1 polygamous mom, the husband, brother, and other polygamous wife convicted of murder. But the girls in that family asked for help again and again from their school, from social workers, from the police. They were being threatened by their parents for not wanting to wear a hijab. They wanted to be free. Their father threatened them if they didn't wear a hijab. And each time the girls asked for help, they were sent right back home. And on one occasion, the official bureaucrat sent to shut these girls up and send them home was wearing a hijab herself. Imagine that. You're a young Muslim girl, you want to be free, You want to be Canadian. You don't want to wear a mask on your face or on your head just because your medieval father and his medieval religion demands that you do. And he threatens you, so you call for help, and ding dong, who rings your doorbell? But a cop, a Canadian cop, but all you see is the hijab. See, she's not really a Canadian cop, is she? If she's flying the flag of radical Islam, if she's so determined to wear a hijab that she wears it instead of the uniform all other policewomen wear. Do you really think a hijab-wearing RCMP officer would take a scared girl away from her family over not wanting to wear a hijab? Or do you think she'd send that girl right back and say, know your place, look at me, this is how women in Canada are supposed to be? Do you think a scared teenage girl would even talk to such an officer once she walked in the door? An RCMP officer wearing a hijab wouldn't even have to say a word. Any young Muslim girl calling for help and seeing such an officer would just lose all hope and submit, or be killed or commit suicide. But you can be sure she would not ask for help to be free from a hijab from a cop wearing a hijab. Separation of church and state. We've heard that phrase forever, but what about the separation of mosque and state? If you're pulled over by a hijab-wearing cop and say you're a Jew wearing a yarmulke, are you going to get fair treatment? Again, it's not a religious symbol. It is a symbol of political Islam. It's a political statement as much as a cop wearing a button for a political candidate. Imagine any crime that has a Sharia law component, from wife beating to alcohol or gambling offenses to, of course, terrorist recruitment. If you're taking a political stand for political Islam, if you're dressing in a Sharia-compliant way, are you enforcing Queen Elizabeth laws or Muhammad's? I asked the RCMP today who consulted on this, which Muslim groups, which imams. No answer. The RCMP was very friendly with me. They just said they couldn't answer my questions, that the expert on the subject was away, and maybe I'd hear back later. I hope I do. If I hear back from the RCMP, I'll let you know any of their answers to my questions about sexism, about politicization, about the separation of mosque and state. Hey, how do you feel about the RCMP? The most iconic symbol of Canada, other than maybe the maple syrup or hockey game being Islamized. How do you feel about it in the wake of the mass sexual assault by Muslim migrants in Germany? Imagine if you're a Canadian girl, sexually assaulted by a group of Muslim men because you weren't wearing a hijab. Would you feel comfortable complaining to a hijab-wearing political Islamist who was a cop? How would you feel if you were fleeing radical Islam, coming to Canada from some Sharia hellhole, and the first thing you saw was a hijab on a police officer? You'd say, I thought I was in Canada, a secular country. What do you think? Do you like this? Are you excited about what will come next? Who knows? Maybe the full face-obscuring niqab for cops. I mean, why not? Justin Trudeau says women wearing niqab should be able to vote with them on, appear in citizenship court with them on. Do you really think it'll be long before we have RCMP officers wearing the full niqab body bag? This is too far. This is not Canada. In Canada, we're all equal before the law. This isn't even a religious symbol. It is a political symbol. If you're fed up, sign my petition at www.shariapolice.ca. Here, I'll read you the petition now. We demand that the commissioner of the RCMP cancel the hijab uniform and respect the separation of mosque and state. Visit shariapolice.ca and help us fight back. Stay with us for more. Welcome back to the program. You know, one of the things that makes me laugh, just the other day, there was this trending topic on Twitter, resist capitalism, and at the bottom of some people's tweets, it said, sent on my iPhone, and I thought, well, how can you be against capitalism if you're tweeting on an iPhone? How can you be against power if you're using the fruits of our industrial society? Well, sometimes big energy-intensive companies try to greenwash their own reputation to avoid being, I guess, targeted by environmental extremists. The biggest example of that is, of course, British Petroleum. practically changed their name to Beyond Petroleum, pretended they were greener than green. That all blew up with their Deep Horizon well. The reason I tell you all this is because Apple, one of the largest companies in the world that makes iPhones and other computers, claims that it, or at least large parts of its organization, are 100% renewable energy powered. In fact, the Apple website says that since 2012, all of our data centers have been powered by 100% renewable energy sources. That means no matter how much data they handle, there is a zero greenhouse gas impact on the environment from their energy use. Well, could that possibly be true? Could it be true even when the wind isn't blowing the wind turbines, even when the sun isn't shining? Well, joining us now via Skype to talk about this and to do a bit of a fact check on Apple is our friend Alex Epstein from the Center for Industrial Progress and the author of the great book, The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels. Hey, Alex, great to see you again.
Hey, Ezra, good to be back.
You know, there's a joke I see often, which is, hey, why don't the wind turbine factories, why aren't they powered by wind turbines? Why aren't the solar panel factories powered by solar panels? When that happens, we'll know it's a legitimate fuel source. Why are they all powered by natural gas or nuclear or coal? That's sort of what we're talking about here, isn't it? When Apple tries to pretend it's all renewable.
Yeah, we have this bizarre distinction between renewables and non-renewables. And I think the key distinction is actually between reliables and unreliables. So solar and wind aren't renewables. There's no energy process that just magically keeps replenishing itself. It has all these different elements that you have to combine together. Some of those can run out or run short or become more expensive. And you have to keep evolving. All forms of energy need to keep evolving. They need to be progressive in the rational sense of the word. So one of the key distinctions, though, is are they reliable or are they unreliable? And with the so-called renewables, particularly solar and wind, they are unreliable. So if a company claims that, hey, we're powered by 100% unreliables, that's like saying, hey, you know what? We hired a bunch of bums off the street. You know, we never know when they're going to come to work or how much they're going to do, but somehow we're all run by them. I mean, that should just be preposterous on its face. And then if you look into the details, it's just a complete lie.
Why would Apple say so much of their company is 100% renewable when that just can't technically be true?
Well, this is something that is happening not just with Apple, but it's happening with Facebook. It's happening with Google. I think Apple is the most dishonest in terms of its portrayal because it talks about 87 to 100% of our operations. It uses that term operations are renewable, which is just bizarrely false. I've written about this several times. So you have to understand, I think a way to think about it is this. If somebody says I'm 100% renewable, I say, great. So you don't use the grid, right? Because the grid is a source of reliable electricity. It is the source of reliable electricity in the world. And all grids in the world have various combinations of coal, nuclear power, gas, some sort of reliable. And if you look at the grids that Apple actually draws its power from, those grids are overwhelmingly the politically incorrect sources. We calculated that overall only 10% of the electricity they use comes from so-called renewables, and that includes large-scale hydro, which they do not support on their website. So I think it's all of the causes you mentioned, but I think it's important to understand this is blatantly dishonest, and it's a really bad precedent because what they're telling the world is, hey, we, the tech experts, we don't need fossil fuels and nuclear, and that rationalizes other people drastically restricting those, particularly for those who need them most.
Mm-hmm. You know, it reminds me of when conservative politicians or even oil and gas companies originally said, well, we shouldn't fight against the theory of man-made global warming because it's so politically winning. We should say we agree with it and sort of fib about it, and just maybe that'll buy us a few more years. Well, in the end, people actually take you at your word. If Apple says we don't need natural gas, nuclear, coal power, one day a regulator will say, okay, you've been saying for 20 years that you don't need these fossil fuels. We're going to bring in some regulation that you can't, or you'll be taxed. I mean, that's exactly what happened when 10, 20 years ago, the oil and gas companies, especially like BP, said, oh yeah, we're all for the theory of man-made global warming. But I want to ask you a question, Alex, and I don't want to put you in a pickle here, so if this is uncomfortable for you, just say so. I came across your article in one of my favorite websites, Forbes magazine, which is a very free market capitalist. In fact, it calls itself the capitalist tool, and it was founded by, of course, Steve Forbes, great guy. And that's when we reached out to you, say, hey, come and talk about your column. But then when I went to print out your column, I noticed it was taken down from the Forbes website, and I checked it. I went to the same place. I don't want to put you offside with Forbes, but have they yanked your article? Did Apple pressure Forbes to take your article down?
Well, so those are two separate questions. The article, as of now, has definitely been yanked. It is not on the website. You have every right to ask that because it's not there. It was not taken down by me. I can say that much. At this point, I've been told that it will likely be back up. So in terms of the causes of that, you'd have to ask Forbes, but the article is not up, and that's unfortunate because it is a really, really important topic that one of the world's best companies, and my personal favorite company, is deceiving the entire world about its energy practices in a way that is setting a terrible example and giving a terrible message to people around the world who are aspiring to better their lives.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, what message does it send to people in China and India and the developing countries about energy use? But it's also, it makes me a little bit nervous in the area of technology when a tech company that controls so much information, like Facebook, Google, and Twitter, but Apple too, when they, and I'm going to read into the gaps of your answer and say that Apple, this is my speculation based on your vague answer, that Apple pressured Forbes to take down your article. That's a form of political censorship, and I understand why they want to do it. Apple doesn't want to lose face. They're spending tens of millions of dollars on PR and probably tens of millions of dollars on these unreliable sources of energy. They don't want guys like you to say the emperor has no clothes. That's fine, but when they start censoring and pressuring media to delete critical columns about them, then I get a little bit nervous about Apple the way I do about Google, Facebook, and Twitter. Listen, I won't ask you any more about the Forbes thing because it's actually detailed.
Well, let's just say Apple should, whatever the situation is, and I just write for Forbes. They make their own decisions, and I'm not privy to all of the reasoning that goes in there. But I'd say to Apple, I'm sure Apple is not thrilled with what I wrote, but you should be thrilled at the opportunity to reverse doing something incredibly unethical. And if you can find one fact that I got wrong or one argument that I got wrong, or if my whole picture is not true, print a refutation. You have not printed any refutation. I have not heard anything from one person at Apple with one single fact refuting what I said. Because it's true. It's obviously true. It is a complete lie that you can get 100% of your electricity from unreliables. It's been proven that it's a lie by me and many others, and it is just one of the most unethical things I've seen by a company. And if they engage in any kind of other, any other kind of activity in terms of trying to get that covered up or having negative consequences for people who publish it, that is disgusting.
Well, I tell you, Alex, a pleasure to talk with you. Good luck. Thanks for keeping us posted. And if you ever do get a reply from Apple, please let us know. That's Alex Epstein of the Center for Industrial Progress. Stay with us after the break. Staying on this theme, our friend Marc Morano from ClimateDepot.com. Don't go away.
Looking for the perfect gift? Did you know TheRebel.media has a store? Make a statement with a t-shirt. Have your morning coffee in a Fearless Travel coffee mug. There's even an Ezra Levant bobblehead. It's a one-stop shop for the perfect gift. And don't forget to pick up something for yourself. Go to TheRebel.media/store to find out more.
Welcome back to the program. One of the things we talk about a lot on the show is the theory of man-made global warming. If you watch us regularly, you know that it's based on junk science, and there's been an 18-year hiatus in measured temperature warming. There just isn't any global warming, even though carbon dioxide increases. We talk a lot about the economics of global warming, too, of how it's an excuse to raise taxes and give subsidies. But I think what underlies the discussions and the love for the theory of man-made global warming for so many people is virtue signaling, which is telegraphing to the world that you're morally superior than other people. And that's the theme of our segment today. Joining me to talk about this is our friend Marc Morano, the publisher of ClimateDepot.com, who joins us via Skype from the Washington area. Marc, great to see you again.
Thank you, Ezra. Happy to be here.
Thank you. You know, let me start with a quick anecdote. I have a new neighbor across the street who just built two small windmills, like they're really not bigger than a pinwheel, on top of his house. Very showy. I'm sure it's against the building code. Most of the time they don't work. I have no idea how many thousands of dollars he spent on it, but I know that the purpose is not to light one flickering light bulb in his house. I mean, he still has wires going into his house just like I do. I know the purpose is to signal to the entire block that he's better, more fashionable, smarter, and cooler than the rest of us dumb schlubs who haven't spent thousands of dollars on pinwheel-sized wind turbines. I'm sure of it. And I want to talk about that with a couple of examples. The first one being a NASA climate scientist and his outrageous snobby comments about Texas, and the second being Leonardo DiCaprio in his new film. Can you take us through the NASA climate scientist first and his just incredible bigoted comments, really, about those dumb people who don't get it? Can you set up that clip and then we'll play it?
Yes. What's happened here is the global warming establishment, for lack of a better words, and I mean the United Nations, I mean Al Gore, I mean the media, and I mean Hollywood, I mean many college campuses, they just scratch their head. They can't get it through their head, Ezra, that people don't accept their claims about man-made global warming. And they've come up with all sorts of theories: the evil oil-funded conspiracy, the misinformers, the skeptics, the deniers are confusing people. But now NASA's lead global warming scientist, Dr. Gavin Schmidt, a man who took over for James Hansen, who, by the way, the previous NASA lead global warming scientist, had been arrested at least 6 times protesting global warming, in many instances just specifically over the Keystone Pipeline. Well, Gavin Schmidt, the new NASA lead scientist, now says that Texans won't listen to him when he talks about global warming because he's, quote, and I'm quoting, a liberal Jewish atheist from New York City, unquote. His message is that culturally they'll never accept climate science from a Jew, at least Texans won't.
Yeah, what a that is called bigotry, for him to say, oh, you stupid Texans, you're just anti-Semitic, that's why you won't buy it, you're not enlightened. And to blame-storm, the reason that, to ascribe foul, malicious, racist motives to people who don't agree with them is so shocking. You've got to see the video. Here, let's take a look at the clip.
Once you build it from shared things, you can go forward. Now, there's some communities I can't talk to because, I'm a liberal Jewish atheist from New York City, right? So if I go to Texas and try and tell people about climate change, I'm totally the wrong messenger, right? Because we don't have any shared values, quite frankly.
That is so gross. I mean, for him to bring in those, I did not know. His name's Gavin Schmidt. I assumed it was German. He sounds like he's got a British accent. If you send that guy to Texas and he starts talking, I don't think 1 in 100 people would say Jewish. They wouldn't. If he's talking about global warming, what's that got to do with being liberal? No one would know he's atheist until he, and right there, well, are you Jewish or are you atheist? Like, he's just, again, virtue signaling. I'm a cool Manhattanite, Jewish, atheist, fancy, and those stupid hick Texans, that's the only reason they don't buy into this. He's a bigot. That's another way of saying Christian believers in Texas are stupid, unlike us in the crowd. That's bigotry.
Yes, and he could argue, oh, it was just a joke, but he's not joking, and this message isn't joking. They actually tout the global warming activists now. They have, and he was referring to Katharine Hayhoe. She's an evangelical Christian scientist who really promotes climate fear and man-made global warming fear. Well, this has excited the global warming establishment. They're all thinking, well, if only we could get those conservative Christians to follow us and support UN treaties and carbon taxes and EPA regulations and revamping it, we need a new spokesman. They really think that, as you just said, Ezra, that these are just rubes country hicks who need to be led like sheep, and they just need to get the right message and right messenger and sort of keep the Jews and atheism out of it, and then the Texans might respond, and we can get rid of people like Rick Perry and Ted Cruz and other Texans who are blocking the agenda. Yeah. And it's completely insulting from top to bottom.
That is so frustrating. And I'm Jewish myself. The fact that I'm a skeptic of the theory of man-made global warming has absolutely nothing to do with my religion, if I was atheist or if I was Christian or whatever. And for him to say, oh, I'm an atheist Jew, therefore, is him really playing a race card or a religion card that's not his to play. But really, it shows his own bigotry. Well, you know, Marc, you make good points about how it's just so much about PR for them. Well, one of their leading PR spokesmen is that deep thinker, high school dropout, Leonardo DiCaprio. Now, I got nothing against high school dropouts. You know, not everyone has the luxury of finishing high school or let alone going to college. But most people who fail to finish grade 12 do not hold themselves out to be experts in matters of geology, geography, astronomy, climatology, a dozen factors that go into world temperature. But they've chosen Leonardo DiCaprio as their new messiah. Am I right?
Yes. Leonardo DiCaprio actually said, despite his lack of education, he said Al Gore put his arm around him one time, and this is how it convinced him of global warming, that Al Gore almost became like a father figure and became his inspiration and schooled Leonardo DiCaprio. And of course, Leonardo DiCaprio was recently at the UN summit in Paris. He is ecstatic over what the UN climate meeting did in Paris. He's talking about his new movie out, which has just hit theaters. Leonardo DiCaprio was on the television show Ellen here last week, and he was literally saying that they encountered all sorts of crazy weather during the shooting of this film. And he saw, in other words, global warming firsthand because he saw wildly fluctuating weather. This is the level of science, regardless of whether you're Jewish, you're atheist, you're Christian. I think common sense would tell you that the claims Leonardo DiCaprio is repeating is just sheer drivel, and no screenwriter in Hollywood would want to put their name to such things. But this is his own word. These aren't written by someone else. He can sound much more intelligent in his movies because someone else is writing the lines.
Yeah, here, let's play a short clip of DiCaprio. He's on tour for his movie, Revenant, which won some Golden Globes. I'm sure it's, I haven't seen the movie. It sounds interesting. Apparently, he had an intimate interaction with a bear. You know, hey, whatever pays the bills, buddy. But here he is when he's off script giving us his deep thoughts. Take a look.
Where we felt with the onset of climate change hit, 2015 being one of the hottest years in recorded history, we're seeing firsthand so many climactic changes that we had to change locations to the southern tip of Argentina to find snow. And here we are today seeing unprecedented weather events all over the world. So this movie I was simultaneously doing a movie, a documentary about climate change. I've been interviewing, dozens and dozens of scientists and thinkers and politicians all over the world. And I was doing a film about climate change while I was doing this movie. And to see it firsthand like this it's going to be an unforgettable moment in our life.
That's obviously Charlie Rose as opposed to Ellen. I tell you, Marc, there are only two things in the world I would take advice from this deep thinker on. One is how to make money. The other is how to date supermodels. Other than that, I don't know if a guy saying, I couldn't find snow. I had to go all the way to the southern tip of Argentina. I just couldn't find snow, and I blame global warming. I just don't know how persuasive that is. Can I read you a quote? He came to Calgary, which is the city I'm originally from, and Calgary is famous for what we call Chinooks. Those are warm Pacific winds that blow over from British Columbia over the Rockies. Everyone loves these Chinooks because they come and warm up the whole southern Alberta for like a day or two, and then the warm goes away. Everyone loves them. But here's what he said when he was in Alberta and encountered a Chinook. Here, let me read it from the screen. He said, we were in Calgary and the locals were saying, this has never happened in our province, ever. We would come and there would be 8 feet of snow, and then all of a sudden a warm gust of wind would come. You know, I mean, 8 feet of snow is quite something. I mean, I lived in Calgary for most of my life, and I don't think I've seen 8 feet of snow. I don't think 8 feet of snow are blown away by a gust of wind. But I know he's lying when he says that locals were scared. They had never seen this before. Chinooks come, I don't know, 5, 10 times a year if you're, I mean, maybe not 10, but they come all the time. He's just plain old lying. What do you, I mean, is he taken seriously though, Marc?
We see this all the time. Leonardo DiCaprio, the AP writer, Seth Bornstein, just tweeted out about how D.C. has gone its longest, I think on record, at least in the last 120 years or so, without a trace of snow, as this is proof of global warming. Just a few years ago, we're on the snowiest decade in the East Coast on recorded history. They were blaming that on global warming. It's all an unfalsifiable theory. And for Leonardo DiCaprio to use any of his life experience on a planet that's 4.5 billion years old as some kind of proof of anything is nonsense in the face of it. And I think this is what we're seeing. They're trying to find a message that they can market and that people will understand. This is why when we have a hurricane, when there's bad tornadoes, they jump on it immediately because they want to appeal to people's emotions. In other words, that tornado wouldn't have happened, that hurricane wouldn't have hit New York City if we had listened to the scientists, if we had done something, we can prevent this in the future. It's really frightening. They really want to turn weather into something that people can vote for, vote to change the weather. President Obama has actually said that. We can do something about it, extreme weather, in the next election. That's what he actually said in 2012.
That's incredible. You know, we showed you a couple of clips today. The first is Gavin Schmidt blaming other people's culture for him not persuading people. And then you see Leonardo DiCaprio using his life as a proof of global warming. And what do these things have in common? It's people who I think who are no longer talking about science or economics. What they're really doing is saying, I'm morally superior to you, especially in the case of DiCaprio, a man whose life is only about materialism and vanity and narcissism. This is his way of saying, no, people. I'm not just a shallow celebrity. I'm very deep. In fact, I'm so deep, I'm deeper than you. Marc Morano, it's great to talk to you. You can check out more from Marc at climatedepot.com. Great to see you again. Folks, stick around. So much more after the break.
Ontario residents are being hosed on electricity prices. The latest Auditor General's report says we've been overcharged by $37 billion over the last several years. That works out to nearly $2,800 for every man, woman, and child. Why? Mismanagement and bad policy choices from the Ontario Liberals. It's going to cost us billions more in coming years. Energy Minister Bob Chiarelli won't take responsibility. He's lashing out. It's time for Bob to go. If you agree, go to firebob.ca. That's firebob.ca and make your voice heard.
Welcome back. My favorite part of the show, viewer feedback. Jerry Manley writes about last week's debate on the show over Uber versus taxis. He says, it's too bad that Ezra and the spokesperson for Co-op Taxi have no idea what the eventual consequences of licensing Uber and like companies will be. There are viable solutions after 43 years as a Toronto taxi owner-operator that has been involved in every facet of this industry. I'm really getting sick and tired of people weighing in on the issue with little to no knowledge as to what the issues are. Hi, Jerry. I know what the issues are for me. Dirty cabs, surly drivers, expensive rides, the risk of not knowing who your driver is, the risk of having your driver take advantage of you in everything from the route he takes to how much he charges to the games about the credit card machine not working, so you got to pay cash. And all of that is if you're lucky enough to even get a cab. The real problem is, like any monopoly, they shut out competitors. So try to get a cab when you really need one during a blizzard, on a big public night like New Year's, etc. Get ready to wait an hour just to have your phone answered. So yeah, I know the issues. Now, you as a driver may have your issues, and as a rare driver owner, I'm sure you have other issues, but I have to say, I don't really care. I'm still celebrating the fact that crony capitalism, that dirty deal between cab monopolies and city bureaucrats and politicians, has been smashed by a tech startup. If Uber was a political party, I'd vote for it for what it's accomplished, but I like it better that it's not a political party. It just gets things done, and people use it by the billions. Seriously, they just had their billionth rider last month. That sort of tells you how angry customers have been for years before we had a choice. Marc sent me a story about Syrian refugees getting pepper sprayed in Vancouver, and he writes, this is a real-life consequence of your journalism. I would not be surprised if it was one of your staff, based on the articles I've seen recently. I get that you're trying to entertain an audience, but there are real-life consequences for it. I would not be surprised if more Syrian refugees are attacked in the days to come. So there was someone in Vancouver who pepper sprayed some people, and you're blaming me because you want me to stop talking about the risk of terrorism and radical Islam and creeping Sharia law. And you think that I should somehow feel responsible for a criminal act done by some stranger. Why? Have I ever in my life counseled violence? Of course not. But you so desperately want me to stop exercising my constitutional right as a free Canadian to criticize the reckless conduct of our government that wants to bring in 50,000 unvetted Muslim migrant men from the world's terrorist hotspots. Yeah, no, I don't think I'm going to stop. But hey, if we're into bizarre scapegoating here, do you mind if I blame you for the next terrorist attack? Robert writes about the Cologne, Germany rape of 500 women, rape and sexual assault in Cologne. He says, I read your blog and feel your anecdotal reasoning is alarming. Maybe they should have given the mob a hockey stick to give them reason to be there. Those women probably were looking for excitement and to watch the fireworks. It was New Year's. I find your reasoning to be patronizing and somewhat on the fence to a mob violence and demonic acts of immorality. Are you the egg sitting on the wall that doesn't know which way to fall? What a bizarre email. You'll do anything to defend the bad decision to bring millions of Muslim men into the West. You actually think the young women who went to New Year's Eve in Cologne were looking for that kind of, quote, excitement? I'm going to show you 3 videos of what this excitement looks like, you little pervert. There's actually an Arabic word for it, taharush. It's when a mob of Muslim men swarm a woman and sexually assault her, groping, hitting, sometimes raping. It happened a lot in Tahrir Square in central Cairo during their so-called Arab Spring. Here are a few videos. Here is a woman being dragged by men underground for a raping. Here's another video. Take a look at this. You'll notice how the men act together, blocking anyone who's trying to save the woman in question. It's like a wolf pack. Here, one last video. Take a look.
الولاد اللي بيساعدوها بيقولوا لها تجري. البنت بتزعق وبتحاول تقول لهم ان اللي حواليهم مش بيساعدوهم، دول بيشدوها لورا، انها خايفه تقع، ان في حد بيحاول يقلعها البنطلون تاني بس محدش سمعها. البنت دي مش عارفه تتنفس من الاندفاع والزق والشد وهيغمى عليها.
You could literally see that one man getting undressed, taking his pants off in a huge mob to actually rape a woman. He's not afraid of the 100 men around him stopping him. He's actually counting on those other men to block the woman's escape, to stop any brother or husband or father trying to rescue her. And the mob gives him anonymity. So that's taharush. It's an Arabic word. I think I'll do a show on it soon. That's what has come to Europe, to Germany, to Austria, to Finland, to Sweden. That is rape culture. It's a part of Sharia culture. And it's coming to Canada too. Here's an interesting tweet from the Calgary Police Department. Quote, based on investigation thus far, there are no indications that downtown shooting was terrorism related. Now, what I like about that tweet is that it was made in direct response to my video yesterday about the shooting. I know this because my access to information requests in the past show me that the Calgary Police have 4 full-time social media butterflies who track their critics online, including me. They follow my criticisms of the Calgary Police ever since I pointed out how they let an anti-Semitic riot happen in Calgary without intervening because they're politically correct when it comes to Muslims. This is a video of that riot in Calgary about 1.5 years ago. So, as you know, yesterday I did a video pointing out that the gunmen who shot up the bar in Calgary on late Saturday night were Muslim migrants from Somalia, both named Mohammed, and that at a police press conference on Sunday, the police officer specifically said he was not ruling out terrorism as a factor. Now, 15 different media outlets reported on the news of that shooting, but not a single one mentioned that comment about terrorism, except me. And it was only in response to my journalism that the Calgary police mentioned that possibility, that the social media butterflies of the police department felt obligated to say, no, there's no evidence of terrorism thus far. I like that part, thus far. I think they're actually probably right, though. I mean, Alberta has a huge problem with violent Somali gangs. It's not particularly part of the jihad. It's just part of Somalia's national culture that was imported to Canada. There are great Somali liberals and feminists like our friend Ayaan Hirsi Ali. But most of Somalia is the most misogynistic, violent, corrupt, illiterate country in the world. But hey, if it's mere gang violence by a couple of Mohammeds and not terrorism, I guess that makes the guy who was shot at the bar feel better. Yeah, not really. Well, that's our show for today. What do you think about our scoop today that the RCMP is rolling out an official hijab uniform? Do you feel good about that? You think that blurs the line between separation of mosque and state? I sure am worried about this. I feel it's cementing the erosion of our secular state, and it's the Islamization, the creeping Sharia law. If you want to join my protest, sign our petition that we will deliver to the Commissioner of the RCMP. Go to shariapolice.ca, because that's what it is. When you fly the flag of political Islam, which is what a hijab is, you are not a Royal Canadian Mounted Police. You are the Sharia police. That's it for the show. We'll see you tomorrow.